Welcome to Pop Culture Retro, which was recently voted the 15th best podcast by the residents of Golden Years Retirement Community in Boca Raton, Florida. Each show will revisit some of your favorite pop culture memories with insider and outsider perspectives. Now, please help me welcome your hosts, Moosie Drier and Jonathan Rosen.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Pop Culture Retro. I'm Jonathan Rosen, along with Moosie Drier, and today we are honored to welcome a legendary songwriter, some of the biggest musicals of all time, Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, Jesus Christ Superstar, Chess, The Lion King, among many others. He's a member of the EGOT Club, Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and Tony. He was knighted by Queen Elizabeth. He has a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He's a member of the Songwriters Hall of Fame. He was named a Disney legend. He's the author of Oh, What a Circus, the autobiography of Tim Rice. Please help us welcome Sir Tim Rice.
Jonathan Moosie, thank you very much.
We definitely have a lot to cover because your career has been remarkable. But let's start by going back with you. When you were growing up, when did you first start realizing that you had a talent, I guess, for songwriting? And what were some of your favorite shows?
Well, I don't know when I realized I had a talent, if you call it that, for writing words for songs. I think I probably didn't realize it until I'd had a couple of hits, and the first ones I thought were just probably lucky as much as anything else. But so I didn't really have a colossal belief in anything other than having a fairly conventional job, because I came from a fairly conventional middle-class family, and I would have thought I would have ended up as a businessman or a lawyer or something like that. And I didn't really intend to go into show business until quite late. Mm-hmm. But my favorite shows at the time, I never went to the shows because we didn't live in London, but I was a rock and roll fan, and I liked buying all the records, mainly American pop hits of the 50s and 60s, Elvis and co. Oh, okay. And I also liked my parents' album collection, so I was aware of the scores of some of the great shows like West Side Story. Mm-hmm. That was a bit My Fair Lady, Oklahoma Carousel, South Pacific, King and I, and several others, including English hits like Salad Days and Grab Me a Gondola. I was aware of musical theatre without having any particular desire to go to it. I just liked the records.
You studied law originally. Well, how did you transition into this?
Well, it was all a bit of a mistake. After I left school, aged 17, 18, I had decided not to go to university, but I still felt really I should do something respectable, even though I had a pop group at school and was singing a bit and not really writing songs at all. But we used to impersonate reasonably well people like Cliff Richard and the Shadows, who were the big stars in Britain at that time, just before the Beatles made it. And Cliff still is a big star, I hasten to add. Yeah. And we that was I was a tolerably good performer. I couldn't really sing very well, but I could wiggle reasonably well. But it never crossed my mind that would be a career. And I went into the law as a law student, partly in an office, partly at a law college, which wasn't really a university at all. And I failed my exams with monotonous regularity. And after about 2 or 3 years, it dawned on me I was maybe in the wrong job. And by that time, I'd made a few demo tapes of my voice, which failed to impress anyone, but people quite liked the songs I wrote, which was weird because I wrote the tune as well. Oh. And I wrote the songs purely to avoid being compared directly with better singers, because nobody could say Tom Jones did that song better or Mick Jagger sang it better. I mean, they would have done, but they didn't have the chance because they never heard the song. So I was the best singer of any one of the songs I wrote ever.
That's funny. So how did you team up with Andrew Lloyd Webber? How did that come about?
Well, I met him by chance, in a way, through a publisher. I was talking to a book publisher about a wacky idea I had. I was only 19, had an idea for a book, and I was still in the law at the time. And he didn't like my book idea. He didn't like the songs I'd written, but he did say, well, I know a bloke who's young man who's keen to do something in musical theatre, and you seem to be quite lively, so why don't you meet him? And he's called Andrew Lloyd Webber. And this was pre telephones, well, I'm pre-mobiles, pre-emails, everything, thank God. I wish it was like that today. And I wrote Andrew a letter, which, because the postal service worked in those days, it would have got there the following day. And then Andrew rang me up and we got together. And within a few minutes of hearing him play the piano, I realized he was a great talent. And I thought, well, I don't know a lot about musical theatre, but I do know a lot of the scores. And I do know that some of the stuff he's playing is as good as some of the stuff in the musical theatre albums I've heard.
No, I'm very curious about process. So do you discuss what kind of style you're going for first? Like what comes first, music or lyrics?
Well, the first thing for any musical is a story. You've got to have a good story, and that is the key thing. If you've got a story that works, you're not halfway there, but you're well on the way to do something that might work. If you don't have a good story, however great the music, I mean, I think one or two attempts have been made to make a musical out of Sergeant Pepper, but there's no story. The songs are brilliant, but there's no story. So a musical is almost impossible. And a lot of the sort of jukebox musicals have foundered for that reason. Because they're great songs, a lot of them, but they're not really, unless it's put into a brilliant story. I mean, ABBA achieved it with Mamma Mia, but it's quite rare to have a mega jukebox hit show. So if you're writing a musical, and if you've got, you say basically there are three main elements, which is the story or the book, and then music and lyrics. I think it doesn't matter which comes first out of music and lyrics, but the one that's come first of all, it's got to be the book.
Would lyrics come to you when you write these songs? When you're in the shower or crossing the street or something? Or are you the kind of person who has an appointment with yourself to sit down and write the
Well,
song?
again, it depends to a certain extent whether one has a tune in front of you or not. But as long as you've got the story, that's what inspires me. I haven't had a shower since 1983, so I wouldn't know about that.
Oh, well.
But that's a joke, fans.
Yeah.
Not a very good one. Anyway,
It's a dirty joke.
yeah. Very good, very good. No, it's something that I just it's a bit like doing a history essay at school. You keep thinking of excuses not to do it, and you put things off and sharpen all your pencils or whatever. But once I get into it, it's fun. And if I've got a story, which is absolutely crucial, then that's a great help in getting me going. If I've got a tune as well, then that might also be a great inspiration. But I don't have to have a tune at this stage. I've just got to have the storyline and know what the scene is.
Right.
So, your first collaboration, which I was reading which didn't see the light of day until many years after the fact, was The Likes of Us. So what was that about?
Well, that was the very first musical Andrew and I did together, and it didn't really work because the story wasn't very good. I mean, obviously, we both hadn't found our feet completely. Andrew was always writing musicals at school, but the tunes were better than the words. But he had this show he was working on while he was still at school on the life of Dr. Thomas Bernardo, who's a Victorian philanthropist. And a Victorian philanthropist is not a great idea for a musical unless something happens, like he goes off the rails or gets murdered or something. So, and Bernardo was a great man, a good bloke as far as we know, but and he really existed, and he founded lots of children's homes but it wasn't a very gripping subject for a musical, and that was the problem. That's why it didn't get anywhere. And when we did try a different route to write something, when we were asked by a schoolmaster to write something for his kids, we both made sure that we had a good story. And Joseph and the Coat of Many Colors is a great story. So that's what we worked on.
I have to tell you, my kids were very excited that you were coming on because of that. I'm not exaggerating. They've seen probably Joseph over 100 times already.
I've only seen 83.
When that didn't work out, that first collaboration, did you think at the time? Do you remember thinking, "Oh gosh, well this isn't working"?
Yeah, I probably. I mean, I was never quite convinced that Bernardo was going to work, not because I didn't think it was good, because I did think it was quite good at being inexperienced. Now I look back on it and I can see why it didn't work. But I never thought that I would make a career out of this. I wasn't I assumed that, this sort of luck, this fortune happened to other people. So I didn't really expect to make a career out of it. And we obviously earned nothing out of the Bernardo show. And we didn't earn much out of Joseph either, because that was done in a school. And gradually that got bigger and bigger and bigger because everybody liked it. It was just a great story, and we told it rather well. So while I was thinking, well, and by this time I had a job in EMI Records, which was quite an interesting job. I was thinking most of the time, even when Joseph was being played in other schools, I was thinking, well, I've got a good job in EMI. So by about the 2025, I'll have just retired after a glorious career of managing record companies in Mexico City or whatever. But EMI was at the time the biggest record company in the world. And even though it's based in London, it had the Beatles and Beach Boys and everybody down.
Joseph obviously opened the doors for you.
Yeah.
You were the one who had the idea to do a musical on Judas, which became Jesus Christ Superstar. What was it about that story that inspired you? And what were people's reaction when you said you were going to do this, you wanted to do this?
Well, I went to quite a few fairly religious schools in my time, and I was always intrigued by the fact that Judas was blamed, as it were, for Jesus' death, without which there would have been presumably no Christianity. So in a way, he did everybody a favor, Christians anyway. And I also was intrigued by Pontius Pilate, who was, as it were, cursed, or at least blamed in the creed, suffered under Pontius Pilate. And I thought it's interesting. Would Judas, if I had been there at the time, would I have been sympathetic towards Judas or Pilate? I mean, Judas betrayed his friend, which was appalling, but he did it possibly from reasonable motives, because he was frightened that the Jesus movement was getting too big and the Romans would come in and crush the Jews. So you could argue, and Superstar doesn't really, say 100% that's what happened, but it puts forward a point of view of Judas thinking, my God, but this is getting out of control. We've got to do something here. And when we couldn't get it staged, possibly because people thought it was tasteless, also because it was very difficult to stage something that had a rock band and an orchestra. Yeah. And so we were forced to do it on a record, which was brilliant because we were able to do what we liked, in the sense that we could mix lots of different sounds and use much bigger forces than we would have done in a theatre. But when it first appeared on record and was a big hit in America, not in England, we did get some protesters, but most of them were rather nice. They were sort of quite friendly, fluffy protesters, not like the violent lot you get today. Whereas in back then, there were a few fairly rude comments, but by and large, people thought this is an interesting new take on a great story, which is frankly what it was.
Yeah.
What was your reaction? When it was done as a rock album first, like you said, and it just exploded. Were you surprised that that Superstar became this huge international hit?
Yes, I was, frankly. I thought it was a good record, and we slightly, we'd gone off our intended path by making a record rather than a show. But yes, I was surprised because, I hadn't had any hits before, and we were new to the game. And we were doing something that even when we were writing it, people were saying, what is this? So it was a surprise. But once it got to number one, I thought, actually, I can see why it went to number one. Because the music's good, the words are interesting, but the story, everybody is gripped by the story. That was why it went to number one. I didn't really realize that until some years later, but the story was king, and that's why it worked. Right. And we told it well. Obviously, you can't deny the fact that you can't just have a story. You've got to have a competent way of telling it. But the story of Jesus has been told zillions of times. Yeah. And sometimes it works, sometimes it makes a breakthrough, and often it doesn't.
You got some comments with the album, but then on Broadway, you said you got protesters too. Were you surprised at the severity of the backlash? And what was your reaction?
Yeah, I'm not sure it was that severe. We did get a few protesters. But actually, as Robert Stigwood, the producer of the show, said, it helps, much better. We're on the front page, not on page 9. And, that was a good point. And as I said earlier, the protesters all seemed to be quite sort of friendly ones. They were saying, we don't agree. And there was no, attempt to sort of bomb the theatre, which actually did happen in Argentina, funnily enough. The theatre that was about to show Superstar was blown up by, I
Oh
imagine,
my
some
gosh.
Christian fundamentalists. Luckily, nobody was hurt, and the producer, I think, said the show must go on, but it didn't.
Hmm.
Quite right too. I don't blame him.
Yeah, yeah, that's a showstopper right there.
Right.
Um, well, how about the film adaptation to Jesus Christ Superstar? Any thought? Did you have any input on that?
Well, a little. I wouldn't say we had enormous influence. We wrote one or two extra lines, which didn't make much difference to anything. Norman Jewison, who was a lovely guy and a great director, he had this concept, which, I mean, we'd never made a film before. We didn't really know. I mean, I was technically asked to do a screenplay, and I did a rather literal one with, Roman soldiers coming in from stage, from stage left and this, that, and the other. But Norman and Melvin Bragg, I think, who wrote the screenplay, had this idea of doing it with kids on a bus, rock kids, which is interesting. I mean, the film was quite successful. It wasn't a mega hit like the record had been, and like the London show was in the end. The London show was a much bigger hit than Broadway. But that was partly because we'd learned some lessons from Broadway that told us it doesn't work if you do this, but it did work when we got it right for London, and it was a big hit. I mean, it's been a big hit almost everywhere, really, but it's never actually, interestingly, it's never really worked on Broadway. It's come back about 2 or 3 times, and it's never really worked. I mean, Evita worked much better, and Joseph and Aida and all that lot. Lion King, of course. That Superstar as a show on Broadway, it works also it's best as a rock concert. You see it as a rock concert, it's fantastic, and stick it in a Broadway theatre, and it doesn't quite work for me.
Oh, I've seen it on Broadway a couple of times. I loved it. So,
well, yeah, I mean, there are plenty of worse shows.
right. So when when By Jeeves came along, you stepped away. So from doing, collaborating with them. So at that point, did you think that was it for your collaboration days with Andrew?
I didn't really know. I mean, I didn't think By Jeeves was going to be any good. It wasn't as bad as the critics said, and it's actually had a bit of a life. But it was, I think I didn't realize at the time as well, was that having had a breakthrough with quite an original style of theatre, i.e. rock, and, I mean, sort of musicals meet rock, if you like. I mean, that's oversimplifying, but that's what we've done. We were a bit bonkers to then try and do a show that could have been written in 1940. And it was, our thinking was, well, we should try and do something completely different, do what they don't expect. But in fact, it would never have worked, even if I'd stayed on the project. It certainly probably would have been even worse if I'd stayed on the project. But it didn't work, and by then I'd already got this idea for Eva Peron, which was a very good original idea, and it was a wacky idea because nobody had heard of Eva Peron really, at least the younger generation in Britain and probably America hadn't. But everybody said, "Oh, Superstar won't work because everybody knows the story." They were now saying, "Oh, Evita won't work because nobody knows the story." Both are good stories, and Evita was, we decided deliberately to do a record this time because it worked for Superstar. And funny enough, the record was a #1 record in England, the album, big hit singles, and as an album, didn't do anything in America. But it wasn't really promoted very well over there. But it was a big hit show on Broadway, of course, to begin with. And I was aware of her, my childish, or childhood, I should say, stamp collection. But I hadn't really got much of a clue about her. But when I heard a radio program about her in 1974, I think, Superstar had been around for a little bit, and we were looking, and that was the time when Jeeves didn't work. And I suddenly thought, this sounds like a good story. And the more I investigated, the more I thought this is a great story which would suit our style. And when Jeeves, I mean, I think if Jeeves had been a massive hit, I think Andrew probably would have gone off in a different direction. And who knows, it might have been even more successful. But he said, well, why don't we do this Eva Peron thing that you've been thinking of? And he came up with, I think, a brilliant score, which I think I sometimes think he didn't think it was going to be a hit. So he took a few more gambles and risks. But when the album came out, it was clear it was quite a good album. But it was still risky because nobody knew much about Eva Peron.
We had a production at the what is no longer there, but the Schubert Theater.
Yeah,
Of
well, the
Evita.
show did very well. It was the record
Yeah.
that worked.
I was in New York at the time that it came out. It was such a great production and great stars. So what do you remember about that production itself?
Well, it was a dead ringer for the London production, and I preferred the London production because
Mhm.
I think, I mean, the visuals were exactly the same, and it was a brilliant Hal Prince production. But I felt that the characters were a bit more hysterical in the Broadway production. I mean, Ava was not. I think everybody was a bit terrified of thinking they were promoting fascism, which they're not, which it wasn't. And Ava, it's very hard to have any sympathy for Ava, which in one sense didn't matter in a way because she certainly had her downsides, to put it mildly. But I think the story for me was intriguing for me because she fought her way up from poverty and did very well and got to the very top of the country, and probably a lot of dodgy things happened, but we make reference to them as well. But it's just an intriguing story. How did this girl from the back of beyond, from the sticks, get to be the most powerful woman in Latin America? It's fascinating, a bit like Jesus, really. And they both died at the same age,
Oh, well,
33, which I didn't realize until
doing
later. But I looked for a third person who died at 33 for the follow-up to that.
Yeah.
how rewarding the show goes on to win Best Musical. So really, at that point, how rewarding and validating is it for you now, just to finally be recognized for that?
Well, yeah, it's nice. I mean, it deserved to win Best Musical, I felt, but I didn't think it would because the reviews were appalling. The New York Times and all that, they were really anti Ava. We got some terrible reviews for it, but we were able to overcome that because the public liked it. And I don't think, I mean, the first few weeks people take notice of reviews, and of course producers often take notice of reviews and pull something if they think they can get something better into the theatre at a short notice. But Evita had a pretty good advance, and it had been a bona fide smash in London. So I think, I mean, the reviews obviously didn't matter because it was a big hit.
Right.
But that was a little bit worrying. I never thought we'd get the Tonys because I thought, well, they won't like us. We're British, and it got rotten reviews. But I can't remember what we were up against, but we won.
Speaking of awards, so they make Evita into a film with Madonna, and none of the music was eligible for Oscar contention. So you were asked, or maybe you came up with the idea to add a song, "You Must Love Me."
And from Evita, You Must Love Me, music by Andrew Lloyd Webber and lyric by Tim Rice. The Oscar goes to Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice for You Must Love Me from Evita.
Yeah, we did it. I mean, there was a bona fide case, I think, for giving Ava a little bit more in her final days.
Mm-hmm.
But frankly, the reason we put an extra song in, we wanted to have a shot at the Oscar. And Madonna wanted an extra song, one that somebody else hadn't done. So all that put together, and by mistake, we wrote rather a good song, which actually fits rather well into the end but 2 or 3 scenes. And it's the kind of the last time that she actually, in our show, actually says or sings anything to Perron. And I think that's quite an interesting thing to have in the show, which we didn't have on the original record. And Ava says, "You must love me," and it's a deliberate double meaning, really. It could mean you must, good heavens, you must love me, fantastic, or it could mean you've got to love me, I'm desperate. And I think Donna played that rather well. It's a nice song.
Yes, very much so.
Yes.
I'm going to ask about Chess, which you collaborated on with, from Benny Andersson and Bjorn Ulvaeus from ABBA. So how did that collaboration come about? What in your memories of that production? Well,
memories of the production on the whole are rather grim because we had a lot of problems, particularly on Broadway. It was a disaster. But I had this idea inspired by Fischer Spassky, the great chess champions, fighting it out as a sort of Cold War proxy in Iceland in 1972. And when we went to Reykjavik in 1970 something, maybe even a bit later than that, to promote Jesus Christ Superstar in Iceland, think. But frankly, we just went because I was quite keen to have a trip to Iceland. And everywhere in Reykjavik at that time, there were still posters up about Fischer Spassky. And I always thought that would make a good musical, not particularly about Fischer or Spassky, but the fact that it was so much part of the Cold War PR. And it was interesting because the American guy who was meant to be on our side, the good guy, he was an absolute bastard. And that was Fischer. And Spassky, who was the evil red commie, was a really nice bloke. So it seemed to me that was an interesting situation. But I didn't want to do the life stories of Fischer or Spassky, but I then made up a story which incorporated fictitious characters set in the time of the Cold War. And the record, again, with Bjorn and Benny of ABBA, who are great sensational composers and writers. I approached them because I was able to approach them because their manager, Stig Andersen, was our music publisher in Scandinavia. So I thinking ABBA would be good. Andrew was doing something else at that point, Phantom of the Opera or something, I can't remember. But I thought, well, Benny and Bjorn would be great for this. But I'm difficult to get hold of them, except I had this contact. So, and I wasn't sure what ABBA were up to. And in fact, ABBA were on a bit of a hiatus at that point. They weren't doing too much new stuff. So it suited Benny and Bjorn very well. And I went to Stockholm, met them, and they said, well, let's give it a go. And it took a long time, but it came out. The album, Benny and Bjorn are so brilliant in the studio that the album is possibly the favorite of all my albums that I've been involved with.
Oh, wow.
The last 15 minutes of the album, the music is just stunning.
Yeah, speaking of music, I mean, you've had so many songs that have crossed over to the pop charts. I mean, you had it before Chess, after Chess, and Chess with One Night in Bangkok with Murray Head. So how surprising is it to you that you write something for a show and it starts becoming like huge on a pop chart?
Well, I think in the olden days, if you go back to Rodgers and Hammerstein and all that, Lerner and Lowe, a lot of the songs in these shows were on the pop charts. I mean, huge number, On the Street Where You Live, and Some Enchanted Evening. They were pop hits, and I always was delighted to have a pop chart hit. I mean, it was great fun. And Chess had a #1 in England with I Know Him So Well, and had a big hit in the US with One Night in Bangkok. A Whole New World from Aladdin. That was one. That was the biggest of the lot.
Yes.
And it's nice to be on the pop charts because it means you're getting the show played on the radio. It's not our instant aim when writing a show, will this one hit the charts? But it's nice when some of them do.
Yeah, I imagine story is your priority, and then if it hits the charts, then great.
Yeah.
There's a revival of Chess, is that right?
Yes, I think we're trying again on Broadway 40 years later, hoping people would have forgotten about the first one. Presumably, a lot of the audience weren't even alive for the first one, which is quite good. So I think it looks as if it's going to happen, I would say, about this time next year.
Oh, fantastic. Well, you mentioned Disney a second ago. So how did you become involved with them to begin with? They approached you?
Ish. They basically they were involved at one point in possibly doing the movie of Evita, and I was in Los Angeles to meet some of the Disney heavyweights, and I was dropping leaden hints because I always loved the Disney cartoons when I grew up, and I was saying I wouldn't mind, having a go at, because the Disney cartoon department or animated feature division were just making a big comeback. They'd had a quietish period, and they now came back with Alan Menken and Howard Ashman doing Little Mermaid, and then Beauty and the Beast was bigger, and they were keen to get back in a big way to the animated features. And I met Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg and Peter Schneider and Tom Schumacher and all these people, and I was not very subtly saying, look, if you got a film, I'm your man. And I did a little work on a Dolly Parton movie, which wasn't even writing lyrics. I was sort of taken on board as a sort of a song placement or something. I mean, ridiculous. I got paid, not very much. I got paid, and anyway, Disney then signed me up for, I think it was 3 years or something, to have call on me if they needed me for a show or for a film rather. And as it turned out, they'd had this mega hit with Beauty and the Beast, and Aladdin was in the works with Alan and Howard. And they wanted to do this thing about Hamlet with fur. They said it's Lion King, and it wasn't called the Lion King at that point. But they asked me, was I interested, and I said yes. And the first meeting I went to about the Lion King, which was then called King of the Jungle, which was daft as there was no jungle in the part of the African savannah that we were writing about. It was just me and a potential director and a potential screenwriter and a producer and one drawing of a lion, and there was no composer, nothing. It was very early days, but gradually it took shape, and people at Disney, including me, thought this is a good story. It could work, and they then asked me to find who would I like to write the music with, and he said, you can't have Alan Menken because he's busy on Aladdin. And we're now, the current policy is to get films out almost every year as opposed to one every 2 years. And so I said, well, Elton John, but I didn't think they'd get him. I said, you won't get him. And they said, oh, we'll get him. And Elton rang me up and said, what's all this King of the Jungle business? And I said, well, it's a Disney film, blah, blah, blah. And he said, well, thank you so much for that. I'm very flattered that you should think of me, but I just can't afford to do it. I haven't got, I'm on the road, and I can't desert that. I mean, he was a big star, but he wasn't a mega star, but he was a big star and brilliant. And so I thought, never mind, thank you for ringing me, and I appreciate your position. And I put the phone down and thought, yeah, I was right. And then about 2 days later, his manager rang up and said, when do we start? So I thought, he's obviously got a better deal than me.
Fantastic.
And then that was it. And of course, Elton, it didn't matter that he was on the road quite a bit, because he wrote music after the lyrics. That was why it was a perfect choice. I mean, that wasn't why I chose him. I chose him because he was brilliant. But in retrospect, it would have been much harder for me anyway to have worked with something that I mean, because my lyrics very much had been part of the script, and I think they worked well within the storyline because I wrote the lyrics without knowing what the tune was, but I knew what the story was. And if everybody at Disney, the script writers, the directors and producers were all happy with what I'd written, they'd say, that brings the story forward, and sent it off to Elton, and he'd come back with a tune, and the tunes were nearly always brilliant. I mean, the one or two songs that didn't make it into the film, of course, but by and large, the ones that did, all were very good and worked well.
From The Lion King, Can You Feel the Love Tonight? Music by Elton John, lyrics by Tim Rice. From The Lion King, Circle of Life, Elton John, lyrics by Tim Rice. From The Lion King, Hakuna Matata, music by Elton John, lyrics by Tim Rice. And the winner of the Oscar is Elton John and Tim Rice, Can You Feel the Love Tonight?
My son specifically told me to ask you, because it's his favorite of all your works. He wanted to know if you had any behind-the-scenes stories on that one.
Jeffrey Katzenberg brought along some real wild animals to this aircraft hangar. It seemed to be that in one of Disney's soundstage studios. And there was a real elephant and a giraffe and a lion on a chain with a lion trainer. And the lion had a bit of an attempt to nibble Jeffrey Katzenberg at one point, but at a previous occasion. And I made the mistake. I didn't know this was going to happen. I turned up at the promotional day wearing a black and white striped T-shirt, which was stripes across. So I looked, and this lion was on the other side of the stage on a chain, sitting on a stool. And all right, it was on a chain with its owner, but it didn't look to me that difficult for it to leap forward. And I got the feeling it was eyeing me up and down, and I obviously thought I was a zebra.
Yeah,
that's a great story.
And luckily, I was not eaten on that occasion. It would have been a good story, I suppose, for the film.
Yeah, the zebra stripes. Well, yeah, you may as well just write "I'm food" on your shirt.
Yes.
So when you're presented with these projects, Do they animate around the songs, or do you get to see? Do they present you with storyboards or scripts and
Oh
sketches
yeah,
beforehand?
yeah. I mean, the songs should be in that sort of film. They should be, as it were, part of the script.
Yeah.
And the brilliant, script writers write the talky bits, and then I come in with having to write a lyric, which sometimes it's a straightforward semi-love lyric or something, which doesn't advance the plot, but it's not meant to particularly. But if it's a plot advancement, then I've got to make sure my lyrics, the song will get us from where the script left off to where it's going to take up again. So you are part of the script. You have to think of yourself as being part of the screenplay, and you mustn't just think of, will this one get to number one?
The songs are the most important component to the storytelling. These are the emotions, and I feel
Yeah,
like it tells a story better than the dialogue.
Well, I'm not going to disagree with that. But no, I mean, seriously, it's a sort of team effort. I mean, there's a lot of detail that dialogue can do that songs can't always do. But it just worked with The Lion King. The combination of I mean, everybody's contribution just was on, all on top form, and it
Right.
worked. Then he went to the stage, which I was amazed. I never thought it would go on the stage,
Oh,
but
it's
it did.
great production. Yeah, absolutely great production. But I want to talk from what we discussed at the beginning. So you're one of only 21 people to achieve EGOT status in competitive categories. So you've won 3 Oscars, 5 Grammys, 3 Tonys, and finally an Emmy for Jesus Christ Superstar TV special. So can you talk about that a little bit? How meaningful is that to think of all the legends in the business and only a little over 20 people have achieved that?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, the thing is that some people who are incredibly famous and talented, just wouldn't begin to qualify for one of the categories just because they don't, they don't sing, or they don't
Mhm.
write songs, or they don't write musicals. I mean, you can be the most brilliant actor in the world and be garlanded with awards, but unless you make an album, you haven't got a hope of getting a Grammy. So it's a bit of luck, really, that the musical theatre tends to straddle quite a few areas: film and stage now, and record. I mean, we should have got something, I would have said, for Jesus Christ Superstar back in
Yes.
the decade. But it didn't matter because Superstar survived pretty well. But so it's quite fun in a way to get this EGOT thing. And who'd heard of EGOTs 5 years ago?
Right.
It's some genius made it up, and it's a bit of a racket, I think. But we were just an Emmy short, and I thought, well, I must go and do a TV special or something. Do a little song and dance, but it fell into our laps, really, because Jesus Christ Superstar, they did a wonderful TV version, which we were executive producers of. Yes, I think we were. That's what we got the Emmy for. And it had Sarah Bareilles, who's absolutely marvelous, and John Legend, and I mean, it was just
It was fantastic. Yeah. So
Okay.
what goes through your mind when you're at these award shows and you hear your name being called? I mean, just do you blank out for a moment, or is just how does that feel?
I don't blank out. I mean, I don't want to sort of put them down, but I don't feel. I think, well, we're lucky. This is all. I mean, most award ceremonies are pretty ghastly, so you can't wait to get out to the booze or the sandwiches. But no, it's obviously it's nice to be recognised. But I always feel that the public. I mean, I'd rather have the people with respect like you saying nice things. That means more to me than a load of people who are voting without often knowing what they're voting for.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it was quite nice to win the Tonys at Evita because Broadway had been so rude about Superstar.
Mhm.
Maybe
Right.
quite right, I don't know. But the one that amazed me, the one I never thought we'd win, I didn't even go to the ceremony, nor did Elton, was the score of Aida. Frankly, we
Oh,
should have. It was a jolly good score. But the show won 1 or 2, I think it won about 4 Tonys. And I was amazed we won Best Score. It is one of my favorite scores, and that was a great surprise. I mean, I didn't even know for a couple of days we'd won the Tony because I was on holiday, and I forgot to ask anybody in England. And in England, people, it's not front page news, Tonys, I'm afraid. I hate to break this.
Really?
Oscars are front page news.
Uh-huh.
And of course, whoever invented EGOT started a craze. So, which is fun. I mean, there've been quite a new one, one or two new ones lately, and there may well be some more, but I'll try and keep them out.
Yeah, that's a clever little acronym, and 21 people on the planet
Right.
are EGOTs. So, embrace
Well,
that.
I mean, I often think it's not a very pretty word. I mean, I thought, what else can you do with that? You've got toad or goat. But
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
So you were just we were just back on Jesus Christ Superstar. It was just announced, I read, that your son Donald is directing a production, I believe, at the Rev Theater in Auburn, New York.
Yeah. It's a very good, local theater. It's excellent.
Yeah. How does it feel like? So, some of your work is in the hands of your own blood. Is that?
Well, at least I can have a go at him easily. I can get to him if he cocks it up. But I don't think he will. He's very enthusiastic. He was asked out of the blue. I mean, he's done a bit of directing, but that's not really his main thing. He's more of a producer. And he also, is a bit of a countryman. He looks after 30,000 acres in Scotland and this, that, and the other. He's a busy chap, but he knew this theatre because we did From Here to Eternity there a few years ago. And the producer, very nice guy called Brett Smock, who runs Rev, he said, Donald, why don't you come up and direct Superstar for your dad? And he was a bit in two minds about it, but he's going to do it. I think mainly because he thinks the area is so beautiful. Finger Lakes is lovely, and also the theatre's great. And he ran some auditions in New York recently and got a very good cast. So it's quite exciting because you're working with actors who are usually just starting out, and you wonder which ones are going to be the mega stars of the future.
Well, I want to ask about a couple of your accolades. So you were knighted by Queen Elizabeth in 1994. So just what was the process for that, and just how meaningful was that to get that achievement?
Well, it's nice. It's I was a great fan of the Queen, and I assume she'd probably vaguely heard of me. They would obviously give a list of people who've won, and it was a very nice thing to get. And it's some people think that the sirs and dames and all that are a bit of a waste of time, but I'm there's a case for, but it's nice to give prizes. I mean, some showbiz people seem terribly happy to accept Oscars or Grammys or whatever, but knighthoods, they say no, can't do that. It's a bit snobbish or whatever. But frankly, unless you're saying everybody is equally good at everything all the time, then I can't see what's wrong with the odd award in different areas.
No, agreed. And you got Disney legend as well. I mean, you have your own star of the Hollywood Walk of Fame. So that's just incredible that to get a thing.
It all depends where you are on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. You've got to be very careful. I mean, I remember somebody saying he was a bit worried because he was outside a sex shop on the He said, actually, that was great because people would come out of that looking down. So
that's hilarious. Well, there blows my cover. I took this photo and I wasn't coming out of that sex shop as far as anybody knows.
We're in front of a theater.
I was at the Pantages.
Yeah, that's right. No, it's a very nice place to be. And my friend Peter Asher sort of said a few words, which I was very appreciative of. And we had a very nice party, a lunch party afterwards, run by the late, great Denise Greenawald, who was a wonderful Disney publicist, lovely lady. And Denise, she got Burt Bacharach there. She got some pretty good songwriters and everything. Lieber and Stoller, two of my great heroes, and John Farrar. It was just a very enjoyable occasion.
Legend, yeah.
A casual lunch, which I don't think was Michael Eisner turned up, so that was nice.
Well, yeah, I just learned that you were coming on, that we were going to be lucky enough to speak with you, and I turn on my phone and I'm seeing your name on my phone, and then a few feet later I look down and there you are on the sidewalk. So it was meant to be.
I hadn't seen it for a while. I must come and visit. It's still there, which is great.
Oh, it's beautiful. It was still there. it was crowded, so I had to wait until there were no feet walking
Right.
on it, so I can get a spot.
Well,
So you wrote an autobiography, what a circus, back in 1998,
Yeah.
but it only covers up until the time of Evita. Any
Yeah.
thoughts of doing a follow-up?
Well, I'd written enough. The book was big enough, so I thought, well, I better stop and save the rest for part two, which I've never got around to doing. I might get around to doing it. Simple as.
Well, so since we arranged the interview with you, you've been in the news several times. The biggest
Really?
news of all is that you've gotten back together again with Andrew Lloyd Webber to do a music
Oh yeah,
for Sherlock Holmes.
Nothing. Friend of mine, actually a friend of Donald, my son, a well-known comedian here, and he's quite a well-known one in America. He's a writer. He's called Humphrey Carr, and he's written on shows on various TV shows in America, and married to Megan Gantz, who's a big name in that area too. And Humphrey and his one of his comedian partners wrote a very funny piece called Sherlock on the 12 Days of Christmas, which is about Sherlock Holmes trying to solve a serial killer operating in Theatreland in Victorian times. It's a very funny comedy, and it would be fine anyway. But Humphrey said, "Any chance you could write a couple of songs just to perk it up a bit?" And I said, well, okay. I mean, I'd seen a workshop of it, and I was very funny. And I said, "But who could write the music?" And he said, "Well, maybe you could ask Andrew." So I did, and Andrew said, "Yeah, why not?" Because it's not a Weber Rice musical. It's not, a big show. Well, I mean, I hope it'll be a big show, but it's a big comedy. That'll open in Birmingham, not Birmingham, Alabama, but Birmingham, England.
Well, hopefully it gets to the stateside. Well,
may get to Birmingham, Alabama in 50 years' time. Who knows?
well, Tim, we want to thank you again for coming on. It was such an honor to get to speak with you. We're both huge fans. And
very grateful for your enthusiasm.
Absolutely, a tremendous honor to speak with you, and bet on the jockeys who stay on the horse.
I know. I lost 20 quid while I was talking to you.
Well, hopefully this make up for the experience.
Yeah. But Jonathan, Moosie, thank you very much. I hope to meet you in the flesh.
Yes,
Okay.
we hope
Thank you, sir.
Thanks a lot.
Have a great night.
Bye, Andrew. Bye. Oh, we're in the lead. No, we're second. Oh, we're going for it. We're going to win. We're going to win. Number 4's going to win. I can't believe this.
Go
Did you win?
for.
Hang on. Now, God, it happened last time in the previous race. We got taken at the last minute. It's way in the lead. It has to, oh no, there's one more hurdle to go. Yikes. It's come down. It's fallen. Oh no.
No.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Let this be a lesson to you. Never gamble.
I know.
That was you just witnessed a personal tragedy. Hang on.
Maybe there's an inquiry.
No, well, yeah, but if there is an inquiry, it won't affect mine because he's fallen off the horse and the horse never finished. And just when he was winning.
Of course.
This has been Pop Culture Retro. I'm Jonathan Rosen with Moosie Drier. And again, a very special thanks to Sir Tim Rice. And please like, comment, and subscribe.
Thank you for tuning in to Pop Culture Retro, where no one was hurt during the making of this podcast.